Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jim Leonard. I'm the Commissioner of the City Department of Records, and we also serve as the Recorder of Deeds on behalf of the City of Philadelphia. I know many of you here, I know I have seen the media reports over the past year or more focusing on the incidents of deed fraud affecting our city, and that's of course where somebody poses as the owner of a house and records a deed and essentially steals the property. It's a terrible crime. We take it very seriously, and it's often affected some of our communities that can least afford to have to deal with losing a home, as if anybody could. We've done a lot of work over the past year with a number of partners, elected officials, stakeholders, community partners, and law enforcement to really try to get our hands around this and come up with some creative ideas to address it. And I think you'll be hearing from a number of those folks today, but I don't want to go on too long. I'd like to start things off by introducing Mayor Jim Kenney, who's been kind enough to join us, and him and his administration have been extremely supportive of our efforts. Please welcome Mayor Kenney.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to debut these new tools that will help us all in the fight against deed fraud. We've seen an increase in reports of property theft over the last few years in Philadelphia. Our administration is dedicated to designing practical solutions to reduce the effects of deed fraud and prevent it from happening in the first place. But the complexities of this terrible crime cannot be addressed by the administration alone. It takes the dedication and collaborative efforts of elected officials, city departments, law enforcement, as well as outside stakeholders. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge Records Commissioner Jim Leonard, Councilmember Councilwoman Parker, the DA's office, and the Philadelphia Bar Association's Fraudulent Conveyance Task Force for their leadership and hard work on this issue. And of course, City Council has for many years worked to enact laws to address deed fraud. Deed fraud can affect anyone, but most often the victims are among the most vulnerable in our communities. They lose their house, which is often their family home that has been passed down for generations. They are left with years of costly court battles, which often makes it extremely difficult to get back what is rightfully theirs. So I'm confident that the tools we're going to talk about today will empower our residents and assist us in the ongoing efforts to eliminate this terrible crime. Thank you all again for your commitment to protecting our city's homeowners, and we really owe our residents, our longtime residents generally, mostly, the protections that we can afford from these tools. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mayor Kenney. Next, Councilwoman Parker, Cheryl Parker of the 9th Council District, was scheduled to join us. She wasn't able to make it. We're going to be joined by one of her staff attorneys, Hillary Emerson. And just briefly, I've had the pleasure of working with the councilwoman in her office over the past probably year and a half on this issue. First, on the councilwoman's task force for the illegal occupation of properties, and then more recently on the Philadelphia Bar Association's fraudulent conveyance task force. So we're thankful for her and other council members' support on this issue, as we could not address the issue, as the mayor said, without a lot of help from a lot of avenues. So with that, I'd like to introduce Hillary Emerson.
Good afternoon. As Commissioner Leonard said, my name is Hillary Emerson. I'm Councilwoman Parker's staff attorney. The Councilwoman is proud to represent a district in Philadelphia that has a home ownership rate above 60%. In some parts of the district, it's as high as 77%. That also means that the homeowners in our district are targets for predators who want to drain the equity from their communities using tactics such as predatory lending, reverse mortgages, and the subject of today's discussion, deed fraud. Councilwoman Parker has been fighting against these predatory tactics for decades, since she was a staffer in City Council. Last year, our office created the Task Force on Illegal Possession of Real Property, which has been looking at issues like squatting, lease fraud, and deed fraud. That task force led to our participation in the Philadelphia Bar Association's Fraudulent Conveyance Task Force, which Judy Berkman here will be speaking on shortly. Councilwoman Parker wishes to thank Mayor Kenny, District Attorney Larry Krasner, and many of the legal aid organizations who have been working with us on this issue, specifically Philly VIP, Community Legal Services, Philadelphia Legal Assistance, Senior Law Center, and the Public Interest Law Center. Councilwoman also would like to extend a special thank you to Commissioner Leonard for all the work he's done during his tenure to combat fraud and ensure that people have timely access to information about their properties, including the new measures that we're discussing today. He has been a valuable partner with our office and other city departments in addressing this issue. In closing, there's a lot more work that needs to be done on this issue, but providing the public with these tools is a step in the right direction, and we're proud to be a part of this effort. Thank you.
So now for the substance of what we're all here for, we thought with all the hard work that Hillary and the mayor mentioned that we've been doing and still have to do, that we were at a point where it was worthwhile to announce a few new, as the mayor said, tools that we think are really going to empower the public in helping to not only avoid deed fraud from happening, but from negating some of the bad effects of it. So the first thing we did was we looked at our old website, and it really sort of wasn't up to snuff from our perspective in terms of informing the public and providing them with tools that they in an easily understandable way. So we redid it, and we created a brand new website that's part of the new phila.gov website that's just dedicated to deed fraud. It's phila.gov/deed-fraud. And you can do several things on there. We tried to make it as simple and straightforward as possible. You can go on, you can obtain a deed or mortgage fraud report form, which we use in the Department of Records to collect people's reports of deed or mortgage theft. And then we also have developed a series of what we believe is to be a much easier group of materials to assist people. So primarily that consists of a group of FAQs that we developed in coordination with the Philadelphia Bar Association's Fraudulent Conveyance Task Force. And I really have to thank them. We put it together initially in our department, and then we got a tremendous amount of great feedback from all the partners, from the legal aid organizations, law enforcement, local law schools, and others. So it was really a collaborative effort, and I think we all hope that people will really find them to be helpful, and they're easily locatable on here. And essentially will tell people, in short, how do you know what is deed fraud? How do I know if I may be a victim? How do I avoid it? And then if I think I'm a victim, what do I do and where do I go? And we try to provide those sort of resources in an easily accessible way. And then last but certainly not least, the thing I'm actually most excited about today is a new feature we have called Fraud Guard, which is a free feature available to any member of the public. And it's essentially an email alert system. I would think of it like almost like a credit report or notice email alert system. So you go on, you click, this is only a screen grab, but there's a button for signing up for Fraud Guard, and any member of the public can go on, enter their email address, and then enter their first and last name or the name of a business, and that registrant will then, or the account holder will receive an email alert anytime a document is recorded in the Recorder of Deeds office, so a deed or mortgage or what have you, in which their name appears. And that's much different than we've ever done before, and probably that until recently that technology sort of allowed people to do. And that will allow folks, we still send actually paper notices to folks via regular mail to let them know that a deed or mortgage has been recorded, but that's much slower. It can be unreliable in a number of different ways that you could probably imagine. This essentially provides a very quick, much quicker time frame to notify people. And then they will be able to, unlike when we send via regular mail, folks will be able to click on the link in the email alert and view a free unofficial copy of the document that was actually recorded. So they'll actually be able to look in real time after they've received the alert to see what that document is and to see whether it actually could be, perhaps they had refinanced a mortgage and they didn't realize that something was going to be recorded, so it isn't actually a fraud, or perhaps it is, and then we ask them to get in contact with us and we guide them accordingly. And key for us, and we've learned in the collaboration with law enforcement and with all the other partners and with council, is that even if the fraud happens, that the time after the fraud that it goes undetected, the longer that is, the more damage that can occur. So the properties often are, the folks stealing the properties don't want to keep them, they want to flip them. So the more time that nobody knows that they're there, they can flip the property. Oftentimes an innocent purchaser can buy it. It may be renovated by a developer, which further complicates it. And that makes it that much harder and that much more expensive for us folks to, like the mayor said, get what is rightfully theirs, and it's often a family home that they've owned for generations. So, as I said, we're excited about these new features, but the work, deed fraud is much more complex than just these few solutions, and we continue to work with the partners on the task force and council and others to keep coming up with better ideas to reduce this terrible crime. Thank you. And now our last speaker I'd like to introduce is the chair of the Bar Association's task force, and who's been wonderful to work with, Judy Berkman, who serves as senior counsel at Regional Housing Legal Services, and for the past several months has worked closely with our office and all the other stakeholders to come up with some of these great ideas and continue to do so. So please welcome Judy Berkman.
Thank you, Mayor Kenny and Commissioner Leonard and the council people who have been so interested in deed fraud and other affordable housing issues over the years. The new fraud guard system, the deed fraud information website, and other new records department initiatives will definitely help prevent deed fraud and reduce the problems deed fraud creates. I'm here on behalf of the Fraudulent Conveyance Task Force, which operates under the auspices of the Philadelphia Bar Association. The task force brings together key stakeholders throughout the city and Pennsylvania who are dedicated to stopping this crime. Members include the City of Philadelphia's Department of Records, Law Department, District Attorney's Office, Police Department, and several other departments. Other participants range from state and local elected representatives and government officials to private attorneys and public interest attorneys, notaries, title insurance companies, community organizations, and also some representatives from law schools who are willing to do some research for us. The first kind of deed fraud, the task force is committed to ending deed fraud and providing information and guidance to those who are victims. We've been focusing on 3 areas: civil law reform and best practices in deed recording offices, which Commissioner Leonard has jump-started, notary law reform, and criminal law reform and enforcement. There is a lot of synergy in bringing together so many stakeholders to brainstorm ideas and share expertise. And we've been happy to work with the Commissioner on the information for the website, as he mentioned. We hope to finalize our recommendations early next year. I just wanted to add that deed fraud is one example of what we call tangled title. Tangled title is when someone has a right to title in their name, but their name is not on the deed. So the most extreme kind of tangled title is when someone steals your house. We call these thieves fraudulators. There are 2 basic kinds of deed theft. The first kind of deed fraud is forgery. The other kind of deed fraud occurs when someone tricks or coerces the owner into signing the deed. The new fraud guard system will allow people to learn of any deed theft promptly and will now have convenient tools to address the problem. All deed fraud cases require the victim to have civil legal representation to obtain court orders to reclaim ownership. The Philadelphia Bar Association has a lawyer referral and information service which can answer questions and refer people having any kind of legal problem to a lawyer. A 30-minute consultation costs only $35. The information about this service and all the organizations that Jim mentioned that provide free legal services to low-income people is now all on the new deed fraud website. And also, all of these cases also involve a notary public. The new Records Department initiative to enter the notary's name into Philodocs will help deter and identify notary fraud and lead to prosecutions. But I want to say a few tips. Most of this fraud can be prevented. If you're a notary, be vigilant about notarizing deeds. I understand from some of our nonprofit partners that notaries in Philadelphia are becoming less eager to notarize deeds and are not doing that when people they don't know come to them. If you notice something suspicious about a neighbor's house, now you can report suspected deed fraud to the city on their convenient form. Register for Fraud Guard, as I mentioned. And if you don't have a will, please do estate planning with a lawyer, not by adding someone's name to the deed. The Bar Association can refer you to a lawyer. I can't tell you how many seniors at senior centers I've met who've come up to me after a presentation and say, so-and-so's on my deed, I added them, I thought they'd help me in my old age, and how do I get my name, that name off the deed? It's impossible, or mostly impossible. Finally, please seek title insurance. The title company won't insure title if there's something fishy going on. So the wisest investment anyone can do when buying a property is make the investment in title insurance. The rates are regulated by state laws, so it's your protection. And what was mentioned, the developer who buys from a fraudulator, then that person's protected and they wouldn't even have the fraud situation. So on behalf of the Fraudulent Conveyance Task Force, like I say, under the auspices of the Philadelphia Bar Association, I want to thank Commissioner Leonard, the mayor, and the city council for all of the commitment they have to preventing this crime and providing victims with the tools to solve their deed fraud cases. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mayor, Councilwoman Parker, Hillary, and Judy. That concludes the formal program. We have time for a few questions. I'll be around after if anybody is sticking around and wants to talk more. And I would just want to close by saying to please go take a look at the new website. Again, it's phila.gov/deed-fraud. And sign up for Fraud Guard. Any of you can all do it. I encourage you to. I did. Again, just thank you all for coming. And finally, I brought printouts of a one-page tip sheet that we put together about Fraud Guard that you're all welcome to take a copy of, as well as print copies of the FAQs that we talked about, which are also on the website. Thank you. That's a tough question. So, because there is no central data source, one of the things we talk about at the task force is that issue of where can we get that central repository of information. In the Department of Records, we keep track of reports that are made to us, and we do encourage, as I've done here today, everybody to come to us. So we try to be a central collection agency for this information. So we get. In 2018, there was an uptick. It's been reported on, a significant uptick. We had 100 of reports. We had 136 reports in 2018. As of today, in 2019, we have 111. So it's getting up to that same rate as of this year as last. I don't have statistics on how often they're prosecuted. I can say that we've developed, the Records Department has always worked with law enforcement and with the district attorney's office. But I can say we've, over the course of the last year, DA Krasner and his staff, Kim Essick at the Economic Crimes Unit and others have really at least as far as I can tell, really stepped up in their efforts to look at all these issues and to work with us. And, we've looked at innovative ways to share information with them and collect information. So I'm not sure how many prosecutions. I see the ones that are reported on in the news over the past year, and those are more than I've seen in the last year than, in the past few.
Legal or clerical barriers to prosecuting these cases?
Legal or
Clerical barriers,
record-keeping issues? No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, that's hard for me to say. I know that we, from a sort of clerical and record-keeping perspective, we're very careful to keep records, not only the documents that are recorded, but of who are recording them, particularly when they're coming into the office, where we think a lot of the source of the fraud likely is, and coming in person. So we keep meticulous records of that, and we've, over the last year with the task force and internally at our office, enhanced the way and increased the type of information that we collect to help the prosecutions. That's the idea. Yes?
This email alert that your property has just been conveyed to somebody else, having gone through this myself without that tool, sounds like closing the barn doors after the horses have already been stolen. You still have to pursue civil action, which can easily cost 6 figures. So what good is this?
Well, you're not wrong. I mean, there's before and after the fraud. It's much trickier, and it's one of the things that we're looking at with the task force, and we have been over last year, just what we can do, not only us, but perhaps others, to, before the fraud occurs, to prevent it. So I'll give you one example of what we've done recently with the help of the law department is we had a suspicion that folks were coming into folks coming into the office and potentially recording fraudulent deeds were claiming that the sale price was on, let's say, $100,000 tax-assessed property, that they were selling it for $1,000. And with the help of the law department and an opinion of the city solicitor, we now no longer, and then they would essentially ask that the tax be assessed on the transfer tax, that is, against the $1,000 value, not the $100,000 value, which is a difference between a few $100s and several thousand. So, as I said, with the help of the law department, we now will not allow people to claim an assessment on that lower value. We will require them, if they're going to record at all, because in those instances, we don't necessarily have a reason that they can't record, because on the face of the document, it's a valid recordable document, but we will require them to pay the tax on the full assessed value. Now, the bet is, and we have to see over the next coming months or a year or so how this pans out, and we have to track it, is the suspicion is that folks are not going to, who are trying to steal these properties, are not going to potentially pay several thousand. They're willing to pay a few hundred. And that's one tool. The challenge is, to what you're saying, and you're correct, is that we're limited under state law, in the recorder's office that is, to what we can do to prevent somebody from recording a document. So the tools we're looking at that are the most impact we can have in the recorder's office in a short time frame, short of going and changing essentially state laws, are to do things like fraud guard and to sort of open up information, do more information and sharing with law enforcement to help the prosecutions. Thank you.